I'd like to introduce our next presenter. His name is Mr. Dave Manning, Director, Global Hybrid Juwi Renewables. Dave has 25 years experience in power solutions for mines and remote energy consumers. He was also previously involved in Australian Degrassi Sandvire Hybrid project as a general manager for the thermal power station owner from initial contract negotiation through to project completion. Based in Perth, Dave is responsible for overseeing the installation and operation of hybrid installations worldwide, with Africa and Australia being the primary focus regions. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dave to speak.
Thanks for the introduction. And I'm not a geologist or a metallurgist or even an accountant. I'm the hippie-greeny kind of flog renewable energy. Thanks to Bill and the team for putting together another fantastic program. As everyone said, it's been a couple of years since we've been here. It's good to be back in person and appreciate the opportunity from Paydirt to present today. Just a small piece on who we are. We're an international renewable energy developer, an EPC contractor who's developed and built over 5.5 gigawatts of projects in solar and wind internationally. Since 2014, we've had a team dedicated to the deployment of hybrid power systems for mining operations, mainly, as you pointed out, in Australia and Africa, which is why we're here today. Going back to the start of our journey in this space back in 2015, the Degrassi solar project was the first of its kind and was a really kind of a proof of concept project that's really assisted in developing the industry over the following years. 2020 was a bit of a turning point for us with the industry where the commercial value of these projects as well as the internal motivations resulted in a push for the deployment of renewables on many mines. Since 2020, we've completed or have commenced works on 9 projects across Australia and Africa, including the Sakari solar project in Egypt, which is one of the largest of its kind in the world. And now moving on to the GCO solar project in Senegal, which is also one of the largest projects in Senegal. This trend in renewables on mine sites is something that we're not expecting to slow down anytime soon. Excuse me. So why is the clean energy technology market and the energy transition relevant to mining operations? And why is the uptake of renewables now occurring at such a high rate? Well, it comes down to a number of factors that have either provided additional motivation for the project to proceed, reduce the operational risks, or improve the overall project financials. Firstly, ESG commitments, as we've heard, is being discussed at just about every board on every project in just about every mining company around the world. Anglo, Rio, BHP and Sibanye are leading the way with some of their net zero targets of net zero in 2040 or 2050, some pretty aggressive targets. Secondly, the regulatory requirements that have historically hindered the uptake of large-scale renewable energy development are changing, primarily in South Africa, where behind-the-meter solar generation has typically been limited. In a double-edged sword, renewable energy and battery storage costs continue to fall, albeit not as sharply as it has been in previous years. While the long-term forecast for conventional generation is on the rise, this tends to be a compelling business case for either on-site or off-site generation being more cost-effective solution right now and also being a hedging mechanism for the future. Lastly, slides jumped ahead. Lastly, uncertainty in the reliability and the cost of conventional generation, mainly driven by, especially today, in the high fuel price in the off-grid markets and grid reliability for on-grid projects. It's definitely an interesting market and we expect to see pretty strong growth in the coming years. According to the International Energy Agency, 80% of all new generation capacity is being built in the form of renewable energy. Another key aspect of the drivers towards clean energy is the role it's playing in improving the demand and revenue for mining companies. The intensity of minerals and metals required for electrical generation capacity increases as we move away from fossil fuel-based generation and towards renewable energy sources. From a megawatt installed capacity perspective, wind and solar generation uses 3 to 15 times more raw materials than coal or gas. If you consider the numbers for kilograms per megawatt hour of energy, these numbers are even higher. From an overall market perspective, the impact that clean technology is having on the mining market is not insignificant and is expected to see an increase in the coming 20 to 30 years. Demand for copper in the clean energy space is forecast to double between now and 2040 and make up to 40% of the overall market for copper. Nickel expects an even greater jump, with forecasts having 5 times the demand in 2040 compared to 2020, making up almost 60% of the nickel market. If we use a tangible example in the amount of copper utilised in a solar hybrid project, the 36 megawatt project that we're building at Sakari will use about 180 tonnes of copper in the key components being solar PV, cable and power electronics. So what are mining operations doing at the moment to decarbonise? If we look at Anglo American as an example, they've committed to around 30% reduction in emissions by 2030 to reach net zero by 2040. And it's not a hollow commitment, and there is a very clear and published strategy that will be closely tracked and scrutinised by the market. Similar to the strategies of its peers, Anglo's starts with a very strong push into renewable energies as part of the decarbonisation of the existing electricity supplies, which is currently around 40% of their emissions. Mobile plant and fugitive methane emissions make up the remainder of the emissions. However, they're a little bit more difficult to abate due to the availability of technology and the cost of abatement. So there will be a period of planning and investigations followed by deployment of these projects after 2025. Finally, for the emissions that are technically too challenging or too expensive to abate, carbon offsets can be utilised to meet the 2040 targets. What is clear is the first step in the process of deployment of renewable energy will be primarily focused on electricity generation in the coming years. So what exactly does the first step of decarbonisation process look like for a mine right now? Well, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for the reduction of electricity-based emissions. Each mineral has its own method of processing, utilising different power sources. If we look specifically at a gold mine operation, the emissions can fluctuate depending on the grade of the ore body, the source of the electricity, location of the site, and the types of processes being used. As a rough guide, 55 to 90% of the emissions relate to the generation of electricity, 5 to 35% from mobile plant, and anywhere from 5 to 10 for the remaining sources. Focusing in on the generation of electricity aspect, it takes around 200 kilowatt hours to process a tonne of ore at a grade of 3.5 grams per tonne, compared with copper at around 80 kilowatt hours per tonne, iron ore at 40 kilowatt hours per tonne, and bauxite surprisingly at under 20 kilowatt hours per tonne. When we're assessing the pathway to a carbon-free electricity supply, it's also important to assess the conventional energy source and the carbon intensity of that source. If we look at a South African grid with predominantly coal generation and a little bit of renewables, it's at around 1,000 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour. The DRC grid, which is mostly sourced from hydro generation, is under 10 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour. An Australian grid here with a mix of coal, gas and renewables is around 540 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour. An off-grid mine, typical off-grid mine in Africa with HFO fuel-based generation, around 650 kilograms of CO2 per megawatt hour. As the electricity supply is a key contributor to emissions in gold production, the renewable energy is a cost-competitive alternative. This is seen as the low-hanging fruit when it comes to carbon abatement. Renewable energy can not only reduce production costs and carbon intensity, but also improves grid reliability and energy security. Possible solutions for a typical gold mine include on-site generation, renewable generation using battery and solar, off-site renewable generation from wheeling arrangements from the standard grid supply, efficient technologies and mining processes, and smart technologies to change the mine load to suit the renewable energy profile. So what are the solutions that are being deployed right now, and what is next? Looking at the Sakari project, Juwi was engaged by Sentiment in 2021 to undertake the EPC and O&M for a 36 megawatt project and a 7.5 megawatt battery. On top of the fuel savings of around $20 million a litre and the corresponding 53,000 tonnes of CO2 per year, the project will reduce Centamin's all-in sustaining costs, reduce their exposure to fuel price volatility, and improve the overall reliability of the power system. The Sukari project is forecast to have a renewable fraction of up to 25% when it comes online later this month, which is a great achievement considering it's one of the largest projects of its kind. Comparing the Sukari numbers with a project we're currently developing, the preferred solution for this gold mine is with a 13 megawatt load, with a combination of 40 megawatts of solar, 24 megawatts of wind, and a 13 megawatt hour battery. After simulating a number of options for the project at different RE levels, the modelling showed that the lowest cost of electricity was provided by this system, which had an RE fraction of 85% and saved the project around $40 million a year in fuel costs. What is very clear from this scenario is that a mix of wind and solar generation provides significant benefits to maximise renewable energy fraction while minimising the cost of energy. This is mainly due to the diurnal generation profiles, so sun during the day, wind at night, and the ability to provide some level of renewable energy 24/7. If only solar PV generation was available in this case, the renewable energy fraction would have been limited to around 40% due to the limitations and costs of battery technology. We are seeing this approach of maximising renewable energy fraction more and more at the moment and expect to see a strong push for similar projects in the future. Moving on to energy storage. The energy storage market is booming at the moment due to the high demand and continued reduction in manufacturing costs. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, the current market for energy storage is around 50 gigawatts per annum, as it's expected to increase to 350 gigawatts per annum by 2030. In this time, the cost of a 4-hour lithium battery is expected to reduce by 40%. The expected increase in utilisation for the mining industry is no different, and as the need for decarbonisation increases, so will the need for battery storage. There is a number of different storage technologies available, with the selection being based on the scale of the project, the price to the electricity, and the proximity to resources. At this point, however, lithium-ion is still the battery of choice, with about a 1 to 2 hour capacity. However, as the need for longer duration storage increases in the coming years, which it will, the market may open up to further alternative technologies such as sodium-ion, vanadium flow, and in some cases we're even starting to see gravity storage as a possible option. With the cost of renewables and energy battery storage being lower than conventional generation, the electricity market is rapidly changing, and the benefits of such technologies is very clear. A decision does need to be made as to the most suitable procurement strategy based on company capital constraints, regulatory requirements, and project risk profiles. And some of those options include PPAs, wheeling, or direct EPC. In a lot of cases, if capital isn't the constraint, self-finance solutions are the standard option, where the mine can maintain more control on the project, benefit from the long-term financial upsides of ownership, and due to the relatively simple contracting structure, this is usually also the quickest way to market or to project development. And lastly, of course, if the mine is still connected to the grid, renewable energy can be sourced through existing supply agreements. Mines in the DRC, for example, are quite lucky in this regard in that the grid supply is already very well decarbonised. So wrapping up, the final takeaway, we've never undertaken a project, or UV have never undertaken a project that hasn't been cheaper or at least competitive in cost compared to conventional generation. So through our renewable energy sources, UV can deliver a solution that improves the ESG profile without impacting the overall cost of production. Thanks for your time. If you have any questions or comments, please drop past our booth at any time. Thanks.